everyone, it's Chari, and today I'm going to be making this sweet Christmas card. So I'm going to be using the new How You Bean Christmas Cookie add-on set, along with Thanks a Latte for that hot cocoa cup, holiday helpers for those cute little elves, and then of course I'm going to use the original How You Bean set for the jar for the cookies to go in. And I'll have a couple other sets when I get to my sentiments that I'll share with you then. So I'm going to start by stamping out my images. I've got a piece of white cardstock here already in my MISTI, and I'm just going to pull off all the images that I'm going to use and load them in my MISTI so I can stamp them all at once. So I'm going to need the jar, and I've got a couple elves. I need the jar lid, and then I'm going to use some individual cookies. I'm not going to stamp the big pile of cookies yet because that's going to go in the jar. So you'll see here in just a little bit how we're going to do that. Got the candy cane from Thanks a Latte and the mug as well. And we'll stamp the inside of the mug too. I'm going to be using some jet black ink because I'm going to do Copic coloring on all these images. So I'm just going to ink all those up and stamp them right onto my cardstock. And you can see I kind of missed a piece, but that's the beauty of the MISTI. I can stamp it again. So you can see I have lined up the cookies inside the jar. I've also lined up the hot cocoa with the marshmallows that go inside the cup. And then I'm going to stamp two more elves as well so that I have plenty of elves for my scene. So I can just close the lid and pick up those stamps, and they're going to be perfectly placed in my jar and my mug down there. And then I'll just ink up these and finish off all my stamping. So now I've got 4 little elves, I've got my cookies, got my jar. I'm also going to add the little smiley face to the gingerbread man because it just looks funny when he doesn't have a face to me. So we're going to add the face. There's also some buttons and embellishments you can add to him as well. So we're going to do some super speedy coloring here. I'm just coloring the jar with some very pale blues, just so it has a little bit of a glass look. And I'm going to do some very, very light shading around the outside with just a slightly darker light blue. But I'm just going to fill that in with the blue, but not the cookies. For the lid, I'm going to use some cool grays, and I'm just going to pull the dark in from the edges to make it look like a cylinder. Now for my cookies, I am going to color in the sugar cookie part, and then I will go in with each color and color in the icing. And I'm just putting a little bit darker on the outsides and some lighter on the inside. For the tree, I used the same color of green, but I put a little more ink on the outside and a little less in the middle. And finally for the bell, I'm going to use some red. You can see I colored the gingerbread man in some darker browns because to me it looks funny for him to be a sugar cookie because in my brain he's gingerbread, so he's darker. And then I'm going to color in my little elves. I'm just varying their hair color and their outfits. I don't want them all to look exactly the same, but I am keeping them in traditional reds and greens. I'm using a more traditional green, but I'm also using that paler yellowy green that you see there on the right. And then I'm just going to go in and color their faces and their hands. And then finally, I'm going in with a very pale cool gray and just highlighting the edges of the marshmallows, and then I'm coloring in my hot cocoa. So I can use the dies that match all these images. I'm just going to line those up, hold them in place with some purple tape, and run them through my die cut machine so that everything is cut out and ready to assemble. So I'm going to use the Snow Day Remix Petite paper pack for my background papers. And I thought that the white with the little holly berries and leaves would be perfect for the background because it's not too busy, because I have a lot of images that are going to go on this card. The other thing I wanted to do to kind of give it a little more texture was to paper piece the mug so that you have this cool Christmas mug with a pattern on it instead of just a solid colored mug. So I've got a piece of the red pattern paper and I'm stamping that mug out, and I'm just going to fussy cut the front part of the mug. So you can see I'm cutting around the handle. I'll cut out the inside of the handle using my craft knife here in just a little bit. But I'm going to cut out the inside of the cup because I don't need that part. Now you could cut that little piece with your scissors if you're really good at it. I'm pretty good with a craft knife, so I'm just using my craft knife to cut along those lines and cut out the interior part of the mug. Now the reason why I fussy cut this rather than cutting it with a die is because now when I layer it on, the cup is still going to have that white edge that the die gives it, but the pattern paper will be inside of that. So just like you colored the mug with the paper almost. Now that it's all cut out, I can just add some liquid glue and line that up with the image. Now you could also do the same for the top, but I decided to color it, which you'll see here in just a minute. But I'm also going in with a very pale warm gray marker and just pulling some color from the sides to kind of give it some shadow so it's not so flat looking. And then you can see here I'm coloring the inside of the mug with a marker. I felt like the inside of the mug would be solid where the outside would be patterned, so this made sense to me. I've cut that holly background paper with the largest of the outside in stitch rectangles. And then I'm going to do the same with this piece of teal paper. So it's going to go along the bottom, but it'll have that nice finished stitched edge. You can see I traded out my card base for a craft card base. I just thought that would look better. You could see the border a little better with the white paper than you could with the white card base. So I'm just layering my pieces together. That teal piece on the bottom to kind of create the ground for all of my images to sit on. And then I'm just going to put the whole panel onto the craft card base, leaving a little thin mat all the way around. So now to assemble some pieces. So I thought these little elves would be really cute, kind of peeping out behind all these goodies like they left them for Santa. So I'm going ahead and putting my elves on my jar of cookies, just peeping out from the top and the side. I'm going to go ahead and stamp with the Yeti ink some icing details just on a couple of the cookies. The Yeti ink gives a nice faded, subtle icing look. I've added some thin foam squares to the back of the jar and the elves to pop them up a little bit. And then I have added some thicker foam squares to my candy cane, so it is popped up a little bit more. I'm going to do the same with the coffee cup. I'm putting the thin ones where I know it's going to overlap the jar, and then the thick ones where I know it's going to touch the card base. This gives some different levels of dimension to your card without extra thickness. Now for my little elf behind the cookie and the coffee cup, she didn't quite fit because I had my foam back there, so I'm just cutting off the bottom so that she can get tucked behind there. I'm putting the thin ones on her so that she is behind the coffee cup. And then I felt like it was a little bit off balance. There was more on the right than the left, so I'm just taking that extra cookie I colored and I'm just going to tuck it behind the candy cane and the elf on the left side. Now for my sentiment, I'm using the new Offset Sayings Christmas set, but I'm just using the little ones at the top. So it's going to say, "May your holidays be sweet." So I'm going to white emboss these on the Rainforest cardstock. I've used my powder tool, so I have anti-static, and I'm stamping out the "May your" and "Holidays be." I'm going to go ahead and use some white embossing powder and then heat that up with my heat tool to melt it. And you can see I've got those spread out from each other. It's because I'm going to cut them apart into some little rectangular banner type pieces. So I'm just spacing them apart so I've got some room. Now I wanted the sweet to kind of stand out a little bit more, so I'm going to use Riley's ABCs and I'm going to spell out the word sweet. Again, I'm going to space it a little bit further down from the other ones because I'm going to be cutting these apart. Using alphabet sets like this is a great way to kind of mix up fonts. I really wish that that Offset Saying set had the word sweet, but it just doesn't, so I'm making it my own. Again, I'm inking it up with the clear ink, and I'll just stamp that down, add the white embossing powder, and then heat that up with my heat tool. Now that these are all embossed, I'm going to use my paper trimmer and cut them apart, just cutting them in little strips. I'm using the wire guide on my paper trimmer to line it up and get it as close as I want it to be to the words. And once I have them all trimmed down, I can cut the ends off and make them the right length. And I'll just use my scissors to do that. So you can see how they're going to fit right there in that top right corner. So now that I've got them kind of where I want them, I can add some liquid glue and just glue those right down to the background. You could also pop these up on foam adhesive if you wanted to, but I had a lot of dimension already happening here, so I just decided to stick them right to the background. I'm also spacing them apart a little bit so that you can see the different pieces of cardstock versus it looking like one piece stuck together. Now I'm also going to stamp a sentiment on the inside that says peace, joy, love, and cookies. And this is also from the Christmas cookie add-on set. And then I decided to add that fourth little elf that I didn't use on the front to the inside. Now I was finished at this point, but I decided it needed some embellishment. I had not embellished it quite yet. So I'm going to use the glitter pen and add some very subtle glitter just to the accents on their hats, to the little ball at the end and to the band. And this is a very subtle glitter, so it's not going to show up on camera very much, but you'll see it in real life. And then finally, something I've been wanting to do on these cookies is to add some sugar. So I'm just adding a little bit of accent with my glue tube here. And then what you see there is the Distress Stickles dry glitter, and it's the clear rock candy. So this looks just like sugar. So when the glue dries, it'll be clear, and what will be left is sugar. And I'm just going to use a little measuring spoon that I keep here on my desk to pick up the glitter and apply it to my card. Now you can kind of see the glue right now, but like I said, when it dries, it'll be clear, and then the sugar will just be a nice subtle shimmer. Not as in your face as glitter, it is going to look more like sugar. So I don't know if you can see it, but there is the sugary cookies, and that is the finished card. So here's another look at it. You can see that sugar is very subtle there. And then here is the inside of the card. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.